The night Gael Fontaine-Brochu was supposed to sign the papers that would hand Montreal's most dangerous criminal empire to his second-in-command, he had a stroke instead. Not a small one, not the kind you walk off or laugh about later over scotch. The kind that drops you mid-sentence, mid-signature, mid-everything, and leaves you waking up 3 days later in a private hospital room with a right hand that won't close all the way and a left leg that moves like it's underwater. His men found him on the floor of the study in his Westmount estate, face down on the mahogany, the unsigned papers soaking up the brandy that had spilled from his glass when he fell. They called the doctor before they called an ambulance. That told him everything he needed to know about where things stood. He was 51 years old. He had run the Fontaine network for 23 years. Distribution, protection, import, the kind of infrastructure that doesn't announce itself, but holds half the city's underground economy together like rebar in concrete. He had survived 2 assassination attempts, a federal investigation, and a business partner who tried to have him poisoned at a dinner in Old Montreal. He had survived all of it without flinching, and then his own brain turned on him at his own desk. The rehabilitation facility his doctor arranged was called Maison Claire, tucked into the eastern edge of Outremont, behind a hedge wall and a gate that looked like it belonged to a private school. It wasn't a hospital, it wasn't cheap. It had the kind of discretion that money buys and silence maintains. The staff signed NDAs before they were shown the floor plan. Gael arrived in a wheelchair. He intended to leave without one. Nora Bergeron-Osei had been cleaning other people's houses since she was 19 years old. She'd grown up in Pointe-Saint-Charles, the second of 4 kids, in a flat where the radiator knocked every night from October to April, and the landlord took 3 weeks to fix anything. Her mother worked nights at a packaging facility. Her father had been gone since she was 11. Not dramatically, not violently, just gradually absent until one day he simply wasn't there at all. No argument, no goodbye, just a closet with half the hangers empty. Norah had learned early that the world was divided into people whose messes got cleaned and people who cleaned them. She had never been confused about which side she was on. She was 26 now, 5'4", 270 pounds, with dark brown hair she kept pulled back at work, and deep-set eyes the color of good coffee. She moved through rooms quietly. She had a talent for disappearing. Not in a sad way, just in the way that people who are very good at service learn to become part of the furniture. Guests stopped seeing her. Employers stopped thinking about her. She preferred it that way. It was easier. She'd been placed at Maison Claire 6 months ago through an agency in NDG. The pay was better than residential work, the schedule was consistent, and the clients tended to be subdued inside. Illness had a way of leveling people. She was assigned to the 3rd floor, private wing. The kind of floor where the rooms had actual curtains instead of blinds, where the meal trays were real ceramic, where the hallways smelled like cedar instead of antiseptic. She was mopping the corridor outside room 14 the first time she heard him. Not words, just the sound of something hitting the wall. Not hard enough to break, hard enough to mean something. A thud, then silence, then a low exhaust of breath that sounded less like pain and more like fury with nowhere to go. She kept mopping. The second time she heard it, the next morning she paused. The third time, 4 days in. She knocked on the door. There was a long silence. "What?" he said. Not a question. "Housekeeping," she said. "I can come back." Another silence. Then, "Come in." Gael Fontaine-Brochu was sitting in the wheelchair by the window which he hated, looking out at the hedge wall which he also hated. His right hand was resting in his lap with the particular stillness of something that wasn't choosing to be still. He had a week's worth of stubble, and the kind of face that had probably been called handsome once, and was now something more complicated, the planes sharper, the eyes darker, like a house that's been lived in by weather. He didn't look at her when she came in. He looked at the window. Nora moved through the room the way she always did, changed the liner in the small bin by the desk, collected the water glasses, straightened the already straight items on the side table with the gentle purposefulness of someone who understands that routine is its own form of kindness. She was almost to the door when he said, "You're not going to ask how I'm doing." She stopped. "No," she said. "The last one did. Every single morning. How are we feeling today, Monsieur Fontaine-Brochu?" He said it in a falsetto that was somehow both accurate and exhausted. Like she was asking the weather. "I'm not here for the weather," Nora said. She left. He watched the door close. Then he looked back at the window. He didn't throw anything at the wall that night. It became a thing, without either of them deciding it would. She arrived each morning around 8:15. He was always awake. She got the sense he didn't sleep much, or that sleep had become another thing his body was no longer reliable about. She moved through the room. Sometimes he talked. Sometimes he didn't. She answered when he asked something, and didn't fill the silence when he didn't. And slowly, incrementally, the way a window defogs, he began to talk more. He told her things she suspected he hadn't told anyone else. Not because she was special, she understood that, but because she was invisible. She was the woman with the mop. She wasn't connected to anything outside those walls. She had no allegiances, no stakes, no one to report back to. She was safe in the way that furniture is safe. She knew what he was. She wasn't naive. She'd grown up in the Pointe. She knew the Fontaine name the way you know the names of weather systems, not from proximity, but from the damage they leave behind. She cleaned his room anyway. He asked her once, about 3 weeks in, where she was from. "Pointe-Saint-Charles," she said, straightening the books on his windowsill. He was quiet for a moment. "My first apartment was in Verdun," he said. "Before." He didn't say before what. She didn't ask. "Small world," she said. "Not really," he said. "Montreal is a small city pretending to be a large one." She thought about that for a long time after she left. The trouble started in the 5th week. Nora noticed it first in small ways. A car she didn't recognize parked on the side street visible from the 3rd-floor window. A man she'd never seen before. Not a resident, not staff. In the main corridor for 20 minutes. Looking at his phone with the particular blankness of someone pretending to look at their phone. A conversation she caught the tail end of near the service stairwell. 2 voices, low and deliberate, that stopped the moment they heard her cart. She mentioned none of it to anyone. It wasn't her place. What was her place? Room 14, 8:15, clean and go. But she started taking the longer route to the floor, started memorizing, without intending to, which staff were on which shift, which doors locked automatically and which didn't, where the service exit was in relation to the parking level. She'd grown up in a neighborhood where spatial awareness wasn't paranoia, it was just sense. She was in the middle of rehanging Gael's curtain rod. It had come loose from the bracket. She'd told maintenance twice they hadn't come, when he said, behind her, "You're watching." She didn't turn around. "Not the rod," he said. "The street. You've looked at it 4 times in the last 10 minutes. She finished securing the bracket, climbed down from the small step stool, turned to face him. He was watching her with the kind of attention she wasn't used to. Most people looked through her. He looked at her like she was a map he was trying to read. "There's a man," she said carefully, "who's been on this floor twice this week and isn't staff. And isn't a visitor because visitors sign in and he hasn't." Silence. "What does he look like?" Gael said. She described him. Mid-40s, thick across the shoulders, grey in the beard, a small scar under his left eye she'd noticed when he'd passed close to her in the hall. A ring on his right hand, gold, square-faced, the kind that gets passed down. Something shifted in Gael's face. Not alarm. Something colder than alarm, more controlled. The face of a man recalibrating. "His name," he said, more to himself than to her, "is Patton." He said it like it tasted bad. What she pieced together over the following 48 hours. from what he told her, from what she observed, from the architecture of what he didn't say, was this: Armand Patton had been Gael's operations lieutenant for 11 years. Right hand, in practical terms, the kind of loyalty that gets demonstrated in actions rather than words over enough years. That you stop questioning it. The stroke had changed the math. Patton apparently had been making quiet preparations. Not a coup, nothing so dramatic, nothing that left fingerprints. Just a slow, careful repositioning of pieces, redistributing contacts, introducing himself to certain business relationships as the primary going forward, getting comfortable in the chair before the chair was vacant. He was here, at Maison Claire, in the corridor outside room 14, because he wanted to know something. How bad it really was, how much function Gael had recovered, whether the hand that couldn't close properly would close enough to sign the right documents at the right time, or whether nature would complete what patience had started. "He wants to see if I'm dying," Gael said, flatly. Without self-pity, which was somehow worse. Nora was sitting in the chair across from him. She was never supposed to sit. The chair was for visitors, but he'd told her to sit down with the particular authority of someone used to being obeyed, and she'd sat. "Are you?" she asked. "No," he said. "Then what's the problem?" "The problem," he said slowly, as though explaining something to someone who might not follow, "is that he doesn't know that yet. And while he doesn't know that, he's making arrangements that will be very difficult to reverse once they're made. Can't you just call someone? My phone is monitored." He said it without drama, just as fact. The line the facility provides goes through a switchboard. The people I would call are people Patton has already spoken to. He looked at the hand in his lap. And even if I got through, I need to be present. It's not enough to call. I need to be in the room. Nora looked at him, then at the door, then at the window, where the November grey was pressing itself against the glass. "The service exit on P1, she said, goes out to a lane off Querbs. It's not monitored. I checked the camera angle last week when maintenance left the door propped open." She paused. "I wasn't checking it for you. I just notice things." He looked at her for a long moment. "The wheelchair fits through a standard door," she continued. "Barely. But it fits." Another silence. "There's a night," he said slowly, "when the shift change overlaps by about 20 minutes. Thursdays," she said. 11 to 11:20. He looked at her the way he'd looked at her in the beginning, like a map. But differently now, like he'd found the legend. "Why?" he said. She thought about it. Really thought about it, which wasn't something she'd done yet, had been deliberately not doing. "Because nobody in that corridor sees me," she said finally. "And right now, that's useful to someone." He didn't say thank you. She didn't expect him to. Thursday came cold and clear, the kind of Montreal November night that gets into your coat, no matter how good your coat is. Nora had stayed past her shift. She'd told the desk she'd forgotten her bus pass in the locker room. She took the same bus every night. They knew her. They waved her through the back. In the service corridor on P1, she'd positioned her cleaning cart beside the exit door at 11:02, blocking it open, casually, the way carts always end up beside doors. Gael navigated the wheelchair himself. His left hand was stronger than it had been. She watched him practicing in the room when he thought she wasn't looking. Pressing his palm flat against the armrest, lifting, releasing. He didn't want help with it. She understood that. He came through the door at 11:13. Nora was beside the cart. They didn't speak. She pushed the door closed behind him, quietly, and they went through the lane onto Querbs. The car was already there. A contact of his she hadn't asked about and didn't want to know about. A man who sat behind the wheel without looking at them with the practiced non-expression of someone paid to drive and forget. Nora helped Gael into the back, his hand catching her forearm for a moment, grip still weak on the right, steadier than it looked, and then she stepped back. He looked at her through the window. She lifted a hand, briefly. The car moved. She stood in the lane for a moment in the cold, and then she went back inside and finished her shift. She didn't see him for 11 days. She cleaned room 14. The bed was made the way staff made it, precise and impersonal. His books were still on the sill. Someone had taken the water glasses and not replaced them. She replaced them. On the 4th day, a woman came to the desk asking about a housekeeper named Nora. The desk called upstairs. Nora said she'd be down in a moment. She took her time with the curtain rods. They were still loose. Maintenance still hadn't come. And then she went downstairs. The woman was about 40, dressed in the understated way of someone who has enough money that they don't need to prove it. Dark coat, no jewelry except a watch that Nora's mother would have called serious money. She had the face of someone who delivered information professionally. "Nora Bergeron-Osei," she said. "Yes," said Nora. The woman handed her an envelope. "For your time," she said, and left. Nora didn't open it in the lobby. She went to the locker room, sat on the bench, opened the envelope. Inside was a folded piece of paper with a phone number written on it in handwriting that looked like it belonged to someone who'd learned to write before keyboards. And inside the fold, a cashier's check made out to her name for an amount that made her sit very still for a moment. It was not a salary amount. It was not a bonus amount. It was an amount that meant something specific and irreversible about the nature of what had happened between them. She sat with it for a long time. Then she put it back in the envelope, put the envelope in her locker, and went back to work. She called the number 9 days later, from her apartment in the plateau, standing by her kitchen window, looking at the back alley where someone's recycling had blown over. He answered on the second ring. "I didn't cash the check," she said. A pause. "I know," he said. "They notify me." "I don't want to be paid," she said. Another pause, longer this time, the kind with weight in it. "Then, what do you want?" he said. She'd been thinking about this for 9 days, while she mopped floors and changed liners and straightened other people's things and rode the bus home through the dark. She'd thought about what it meant to be seen by someone who had spent 23 years making sure other people didn't see him coming. She'd thought about what it meant to be useful in a way that was specific to you, to your particular way of moving through rooms, to the exact nature of your invisibility. She'd thought about her mother's flat in Pointe-Saint-Charles and the radiator that knocked, and the landlord who took 3 weeks. "Nothing," she said. "I want you to know that." Silence. "Most people want something," he said. "I know," she said. "That makes you either very naive," he said, "or very dangerous. Or," she said, "I just cleaned your room." She heard something on the other end that might, from another man, have been a laugh. From him, it was more like a door opening a crack. "Are you still at Maison Claire?" he said. "Yes," she said. "I'm coming back Thursday," he said. "I need another 3 weeks minimum. The physiotherapist says. I disagree, but apparently I don't have veto power over my own recovery." "Nobody does," she said. A pause. "No," he said. "I'm learning that." She looked at the blown-over recycling in the alley. Someone's cardboard was tumbling slowly down toward the fence. "I'll have your room ready," she said. "It's always ready," he said. "That's the problem." She didn't quite know what to say to that. "Nora," he said. Her name, just that, in a voice that had probably given orders to people who carried guns for 23 years, and somehow the way he said it now was nothing like an order. "Thursday," she said, and hung up. She stood by the window for a while. The cardboard had caught on the fence. It was going to be cold again tomorrow. She had an early shift. She went to make tea. He came back Thursday. He looked different, not better exactly, not worse. More settled, maybe, like a man who had remembered in the 11 days as outside those walls what he was capable of. The hand still wasn't right. He still used the chair, but he held his shoulders differently, and the particular fury that had been bouncing off the walls of room 14 for weeks had quieted into something more directed. She was changing the water glasses when he came through the door. "The curtain rod," he said, looking at it. Still loose, she said. Maintenance hasn't come. He was quiet for a moment, then, with his left hand, the good one, he reached up and checked the bracket, himself, his chair beside the window. He pressed it, assessed it, looked at the wall anchor. Wrong side anchors, this. Whoever installed this used a short anchor in drywall. It's going to keep loosening. She looked at him. He looked slightly embarrassed, the specific embarrassment of someone who's revealed a competence they'd prefer to keep private. I renovated my own apartment once, he said. Verdun, a long time ago. He paused. I'll have someone send the right anchors. It's not your building, she said. But it's my room. She went back to the glasses. Patton's been dealt with, he said, without looking at her. In the same tone he'd said it's my room. Factual. Not cruelty, just accuracy. You don't need to worry about the man in the corridor. She hadn't been worrying about him, but she understood the offering for what it was. How's the physiotherapy, she said. Aggressive, he said. Good. The woman they've assigned to me believes in pain as a motivator, which I actually respect. Your hand? He looked at it, opened it slowly, all 5 fingers extending imperfectly, the ring finger still dragging a half-second behind, but extending. Better, he said. Good, she said. She gathered her things, moved toward the door. He didn't stop her. He never stopped her, never made her stay, which she noticed and appreciated in a way she couldn't quite articulate. But at the door she paused, turned back. The check, she said. I'm going to tear it up. He looked at her. If that's all right, she added. He was quiet for a moment. It's your check, he said. I know, she said. I wanted you to know I was going to. He held her gaze for a moment, and there was something in it she didn't have a name for yet. The look of a man who has spent a very long time transacting with people and has just encountered something that isn't a transaction. Not quite knowing what to do with it, not uncomfortable with the not knowing, which was, she thought, maybe its own kind of answer. The number on the paper, he said. Keep it. She considered this. Okay, she said. She left, walked down the corridor, past the spot where the man named Patton had stood pretending to look at his phone. She moved through it easily, the way she moved through all rooms, cart at her side. Head down, invisible to everyone she passed. But something had shifted in the weight of it. The invisibility. It wasn't erasure if someone knew you were there. It wasn't disappearing if one person in the building was waiting for the door to open. She took the stairs to the 2nd floor and went to work. Outside, the first real snow of the season was starting to come down over Outremont, covering the hedge walls and the parked cars and the lane-off curbs in the same patient, indifferent white. The city going quiet, in the way it does before it reveals what was hidden underneath all along.